Okay, so before I was saying that there's a few ways of presenting dependence, and that one was 3 levels of understanding: causal dependence, dependence on parts, and dependent designation. Okay? Then another way that His Holiness speaks about it, and when we were in Pennsylvania, this is how he taught about it. He said there were 2 levels. There was causal dependence and dependent designation, and then within dependent designation, there was what he called mutual dependence and dependence on term and concept. Okay? And so the dependence on term and concept is pretty much the same as we talked about before. But the mutual dependence, again, it's a form of dependent designation, but it's really emphasizing how things arise in dependence upon each other. Okay? So he says that if we look at a seed and a sprout from the viewpoint of causal dependence, the seed causes the sprout. Okay? It goes, the dependence goes one way, from the seed to the sprout. But if you look at the relationship of the seed and the sprout from the viewpoint of mutual dependence, then the seed becomes a seed in relationship to the sprout, and the sprout becomes a sprout in relationship to the seed. In other words, the dependence goes both ways. You can't have a cause without having a result that is capable of being produced by that cause. And you can't have a result without having a cause that is capable of producing it. So that these 2 things come to be cause and effect in relationship to each other. And he was saying that it's not just the label cause and effect that are given in relationship to each other. Okay? Because we can understand that pretty well. They're called cause and effect in relationship to each other. But also because they're kind of like their entity, or what they're referring to, their identity exists in relationship to each other. So then that was making me think, and here I'll share my ideas with you, is that it's not just the seed is called a cause and the sprout is called a result, but there's like inherently a seed and inherently a sprout. But, this thing, this basis of designation, does not really become a seed, worthy of bearing the name seed, unless there's the potential to produce a result, unless there exists the potential for a result in relationship to it. And this thing over here, doesn't actually get labeled as sprout or become, a result until without the seed. In other words, it's not like each thing has some other identity that is inherent in it, and just the cause and effect part is labeled in relationship to each other. Okay? So, and then they also give the example, of course, like long and short, tall and small. Here in the U.S., I'm considered on the short side. I go to Singapore and I'm a giant. Okay? So, these kinds of things, so many things, are designated in dependence upon each other. Yeah? And I think in the way that we talk about karma too, why is something called a constructive action? It's because of the result that it produces. Not because inherently it's a constructive action, but the Buddha looked at the results and said, oh, we'll call the names of the things that cause this kind of result constructive. And when there was suffering and misery, we'll call the names of that destructive. So that constructive and destructive karma got their names in relationship to the kind of results that they produce. And I think this is a very, very different way of thinking about ethical cause and effect than you get in some other systems where there was an external force who decided what was good and bad to start with, and then you got punished and rewarded in response to those. Because that's the dependence just going, you know, you do this, you get that. Okay?